Welcome, my dear listeners, to Campfire Storytime. I'm happy that you are here and want to thank you all who subscribe to the channel. It really means the most to me. With that said, let's jump into our first satanic cult encounter in an asylum story. The car's engine sputtered to a halt, and Alex turned off the headlights, plunging them into near-total darkness. The old St. Vincent Asylum loomed ahead, a sinister silhouette against the night sky. Fog curled around the crumbling structure, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Sarah and Mark, Alex's best friends, shifted uneasily in their seats. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Absolutely," Alex replied, masking his own nerves with false bravado. "We've been talking about this for months. It's now or never." They grabbed their backpacks, filled with flashlights, cameras, and a few snacks, and stepped out of the car. The asylum's front entrance gaped open like a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. The air was thick with the scent of decay. And something else, something metallic and sharp that made Alex's skin crawl. "Let's get this over with," Mark muttered, leading the way. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating graffiti-covered walls and broken furniture. The silence was almost oppressive, each creak of the floorboards under their feet sounding like a gunshot. As they ventured further inside, the sense of being watched grew stronger. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, stopping dead in her tracks. A faint whisper seemed to drift through the hallway, too low to make out any words, but unmistakably there. Alex shook his head, trying to dispel the feeling of dread that was creeping over him. "Probably just the wind," he said, though he didn't believe it. They continued their exploration, moving deeper into the asylum. Each room they passed was a testament to the building's dark history. Rusty gurneys, crumbling walls, and faded medical charts that hinted at the horrors that once took place here. But it wasn't until they stumbled upon the ritual room that the true horror of the night began to unfold. The door to the room was slightly ajar, a faint light flickering from within. Alex pushed it open, and the sight that greeted them made his blood run cold. The room was filled with satanic symbols painted in red, candles arranged in a pentagram, and the remnants of a ritual, animal bones, melted wax, and a book bound in what looked like human skin. "What the hell is this?" Mark whispered, his face pale. Sarah clutched Alex's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave, now!" Before Alex could respond, the whispers returned, louder this time, and accompanied by the sound of footsteps. They weren't alone. The realization hit them like a sledgehammer. Someone, or something, was in the asylum with them. "We have to go," Alex said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Now!" They turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the temperature in the room dropped drastically. "Stay close," Alex ordered, moving towards a window in the hope of finding another way out. As they fumbled in the darkness, they heard the unmistakable sound of chanting coming from below. Following the sound, they discovered a hidden staircase leading to a basement. Against their better judgment, they descended, the chanting growing louder with each step. At the bottom, they peered around a corner and saw a group of hooded figures performing a ritual. The sight was horrifying. An altar draped in black, surrounded by candles, and in the center, a bound and gagged figure struggling against their restraints. "Oh my God!" Sarah gasped, her voice barely a whisper. The cult members seemed unaware of their presence, focused entirely on their dark ceremony. But as Alex took a step back, his foot hit a loose piece of debris, sending it clattering across the floor. The chanting stopped abruptly, and the hooded figures turned as one, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Run!" Alex shouted, grabbing Sarah and Mark's arms. They bolted up the stairs, their footsteps echoing through the asylum. The cult members were right behind them, their robes fluttering like dark wings. Panic fueled their flight, but the maze-like corridors of the asylum worked against them. Every turn seemed to lead to a dead end. Every door was locked or led nowhere. "We're trapped!" Mark yelled, his voice cracking with fear. "Keep moving!" Alex urged, refusing to give in to despair. They burst into a large room, slamming the door behind them. The cult members pounded on the door, their inhuman strength causing it to splinter. They searched frantically for another way out, but the windows were barred, and there was no other door. Just as the door began to give way, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. The cult members' pounding stopped, replaced by screams of terror. Alex, Sarah, and Mark huddled together, unsure of what was happening. A ghostly figure appeared in the center of the room, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It raised a hand, and the cult members were thrown back as if hit by an invisible force. The figure turned to the trio, its expression both sorrowful and stern. "You must leave this place," it said, its voice echoing in their minds. "The evil here is too great." Without another word, the figure vanished, leaving them in stunned silence. The door to the room swung open, and they didn't hesitate. They ran through the asylum, the oppressive presence lifting with each step. They burst out of the asylum, gulping in the fresh night air as if they had been drowning. Behind them, the building seemed to sigh, the fog curling away from it as if repelled by some unseen force. "Did that really happen?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Alex nodded, still trying to process what they had seen. "We need to tell someone. The police, the news, anyone who will listen." As they drove away, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of the asylum's dark history. The ghostly figure's warning echoed in his mind, and he knew that St. Vincent Asylum would haunt them all for the rest of their lives. The cult was still out there, and the evil that lurked within those walls was far from vanquished. The days following their escape from St. Vincent Asylum were a blur of sleepless nights and anxious whispers. Alex, Sarah, and Mark tried to return to their normal lives, but the memories of that night clung to them like a dark shadow. Every creak of a floorboard or rustle of leaves made their hearts race, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Alex became obsessed with researching the asylum, diving into old newspaper archives and local legends. He discovered that St. Vincent had been built in the late 1800s and had quickly gained a reputation for its cruel treatments and high patient mortality rate. The rumors of satanic rituals had started in the 1960s, when several children went missing in the area, and their bodies were later found near the asylum grounds, mutilated in ways that suggested ritualistic killings. One evening, as Alex pored over yet another old article, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "We need to talk. Urgent." They met at a small diner, their usual haunt. Sarah's face was pale, her eyes haunted. She slid a folder across the table to Alex. "I found something. It's worse than we thought." Alex opened the folder to find photographs of missing persons, all from the last few years. Each one had a note scribbled on the back. "Last seen near St. Vincent Asylum." There were over a dozen photos. "How did you get these?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "My uncle works in the police department. I told him about our encounter, and he gave me these. He said they never had enough evidence to connect the disappearances to the asylum, but it's clear to me now. The cult is still active, and they're using the asylum as their base." Mark arrived late, his face ashen. "Guys, I think they are following us. I saw a hooded figure outside my apartment last night. When I went to check, they were gone, but I found this." He pulled out a piece of paper with the same satanic symbol they had seen in the asylum. Realizing they couldn't go to the police without concrete evidence, the trio made a grim decision. They had to go back to the asylum and gather proof of the cult's activities. Equipped with better cameras, more flashlights, and a determination born of fear and anger, they set out once more. The asylum looked even more foreboding than before. As they approached, the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing the same decaying interiors. But this time, they moved with purpose, heading straight for the basement where they had seen the cult. They found the hidden staircase and descended, the memory of the chanting still fresh in their minds. This time, they moved more cautiously, every creak and whisper making their hearts pound. Reaching the basement, they found it eerily quiet. The altar and candles were gone, replaced by a circle of symbols etched into the stone floor. Alex began taking photos, while Sarah and Mark searched for any hidden compartments or evidence. Without warning, the chanting began again, this time louder and more intense. Hooded figures emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. Alex snapped pictures frantically, but a cold hand grabbed his wrist, wrenching the camera away. "You should not have returned," a voice hissed, filled with malice. Sarah and Mark were dragged to the center of the room, bound by invisible forces. The cult leader, a tall figure with eyes glowing red, approached them. "You have seen too much. Now you will become part of the ritual." As the cult members began their chants, the temperature plummeted, and the air grew thick with a palpable evil. Alex struggled against his invisible bonds, but they held firm. He glanced at Sarah and Mark, their faces pale with terror. Just as the cult leader raised a ceremonial dagger, the room was filled with a blinding light. The ghostly figure they had seen before appeared, more solid and powerful this time. It raised its hand, and the cult members were thrown back, their hoods falling to reveal gaunt, pale faces twisted with fear. "You will not harm them," the ghostly figure declared, its voice echoing with a power that made the very walls tremble. The cult leader screamed in rage, lunging at the ghostly figure, but was repelled by an unseen force. The symbols on the floor began to glow, and the ground shook violently. The ghostly figure turned to Alex, Sarah, and Mark. "Run! Now!" Freed from their bonds, they scrambled up the stairs, the building shaking around them. The walls began to crack, and debris fell from the ceiling. They burst out of the front entrance, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until they reached their car. As they sped away, the asylum collapsed in on itself, the ground swallowing it whole. They watched in stunned silence, the realization of their narrow escape sinking in. The next day, the news reported the mysterious collapse of St. Vincent Asylum, but there was no mention of the cult or the supernatural events. Alex, Sarah, and Mark knew they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, but the ordeal had left them scarred. Alex kept a single photograph from the night, the ghostly figure standing in the basement, a reminder of the evil they had faced and the supernatural force that had saved them. They made a pact never to speak of it again, hoping to bury the memories along with the asylum. But deep down, they knew the cult was still out there, and the evil they had encountered was far from vanquished. The urban legend of St. Vincent Asylum would live on, and they would carry the weight of their encounter for the rest of their lives. Now, with this bone-chilling story finished, let's jump into the second one. Nestled deep in a remote forest, the unnamed asylum had long been a source of local legend and fear. Erected in the early 1900s as a state-of-the-art psychiatric facility, it quickly gained notoriety for its harsh treatments and high patient mortality rate. Stories of abuse, neglect, and inexplicable disappearances circulated, but the asylum continued to operate until a scandal in the 1960s forced its closure. The details of the scandal were hushed up, and official records were sealed, leaving a void filled by rumors of dark rituals and satanic cult activities. Over the decades, the building fell into disrepair, and nature began reclaiming the grounds, but its sinister reputation persisted. Local youths would occasionally dare each other to venture into the asylum at night, but few were brave enough to venture far. Those who did often returned with wild tales of ghostly apparitions, disembodied whispers, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Despite, or perhaps because of, its ominous reputation, the asylum remained a magnet for thrill-seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. However, the stories also kept away most who might otherwise seek to uncover the truth behind the legends, ensuring that the asylum's secrets remained well hidden. One legend in particular spoke of a secret society of Satanists who had taken control of the asylum in its final years. It was said that they used the patients in their dark rituals, attempting to summon demonic entities and harness their power. These stories were fueled by the discovery of strange symbols and markings found in the building, and by the testimonies of those who claimed to have heard chanting and seen hooded figures during their nocturnal explorations. Yet, without concrete evidence, these tales were dismissed as mere urban myths. Despite the danger, the lure of the unknown proved irresistible to some. It was within this shadowy framework that John, a seasoned paranormal investigator, found himself drawn to the asylum. Having spent years exploring and documenting haunted locations, he had heard countless tales of haunted asylums, but something about this place felt different, more real, more dangerous. His instincts told him that beneath the layers of legend lay a core of truth that begged to be uncovered. And so, with determination and trepidation, he decided to investigate the infamous asylum, knowing it could be the most challenging and potentially deadly case of his career. John had built his reputation on uncovering the truth behind paranormal phenomena, armed with nothing but his sharp intellect, a camera, and an unshakable belief in the supernatural. His interest in the unnamed asylum had been piqued by a recent surge in reported sightings and encounters, all describing eerily similar experiences. People spoke of seeing shadowy figures and hearing chants that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the building. More disturbingly, a few had disappeared altogether, their fates unknown but widely speculated to be tied to the sinister legends of the asylum. Motivated by both professional curiosity and a personal drive to confront the darkness that lurked within such places, John began his research. He pored over old news articles, archival footage, and even interviews with the few surviving former staff members and patients. The more he dug, the more he became convinced that the stories of satanic rituals and dark forces were not just fabrications, but were grounded in a grim reality. He found mentions of a particular event in the late 1950s where several patients and staff members vanished overnight, a case that was swiftly buried by the authorities. John's resolve was further solidified when he uncovered a cryptic journal entry from a former nurse who had worked at the asylum. The nurse described finding symbols carved into the walls and hearing the chilling chants of a cult conducting secret ceremonies in the basement. This entry, combined with the numerous accounts of paranormal activity, convinced John that he needed to go beyond research and experience the asylum firsthand. He felt a duty to document the truth and, if possible, put to rest the restless spirits trapped within its decaying walls. However, John knew he couldn't do this alone. The scope of the investigation was too vast, and the risks too high. He needed a team of specialists who could help him navigate the physical and supernatural dangers of the asylum. With careful consideration, he reached out to 3 trusted colleagues: Lisa, a psychic with a strong sensitivity to spiritual energies; Eric, a tech expert with a knack for capturing paranormal evidence; and Maria, a historian with extensive knowledge of occult practices and the asylum's dark history. Together, they would form a formidable team, prepared to face whatever horrors awaited them within the forsaken asylum. Lisa was the first to join the team, her reputation as a gifted psychic preceding her. She had worked with John on several investigations, her abilities proving invaluable in sensing and communicating with spirits. Lisa had a quiet intensity about her, a calm demeanor that belied the often terrifying nature of her work. She agreed to join John without hesitation, sharing his fascination with the asylum and its troubled past. She believed that her abilities could help uncover the truth and possibly bring peace to the tormented souls rumored to haunt the place. Eric, the tech specialist, was next. Known for his innovative use of technology in paranormal investigations, Eric had developed a range of devices designed to detect and record supernatural activity. His arsenal included EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and sensitive audio equipment capable of capturing EVP, electronic voice phenomena. Eric was skeptical by nature but had witnessed enough inexplicable phenomena to keep an open mind. When John approached him with the project, Eric saw it as an opportunity to push the boundaries of his work and perhaps capture the most compelling evidence of the paranormal yet. Maria, the historian, completed the team. Her expertise in historical research and her deep knowledge of occult practices made her an invaluable asset. Maria had a passion for uncovering hidden truths and had spent years studying the dark history of various haunted locations. She had access to rare documents and a network of academic contacts that provided her with unique insights into the asylum's past. Maria was intrigued by the challenge and the possibility of discovering new information about the cult rumored to have operated within the asylum's walls. With the team assembled, John organized a meeting to discuss their plan of action. They gathered in a small cafe, poring over maps of the asylum and discussing their strategy. Each member brought their own perspective and expertise, contributing to a comprehensive approach to the investigation. They decided to arrive at the asylum at dusk, giving them enough daylight to set up their equipment while ensuring they could also document the night when paranormal activity was typically at its peak. As they finalized their plans, a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose settled over the group. They knew the risks involved, but were united by a common goal: to uncover the truth behind the legends and bring to light whatever dark forces lingered within the asylum. With their preparations complete, they set a date for their expedition, each member steeling themselves for what lay ahead. The stage was set for a confrontation with the unknown, and together they would face the terrors of the abandoned asylum. The sun dipped below the horizon as John, Lisa, Eric, and Maria arrived at the asylum, casting long shadows across the decaying structure. The building stood like a sentinel of forgotten times, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a fitting welcome to a place steeped in darkness. They parked their van near the entrance, the gravel crunching under their feet as they unloaded their equipment. John led the way, his flashlight cutting through the growing gloom. The gates creaked ominously as they pushed them open, revealing a path choked with weeds and debris. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the distant call of a lone crow. As they approached the main building, the enormity of their task began to settle in. The asylum's hulking presence seemed to absorb the light, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. Inside, the atmosphere was even more oppressive. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees, and the stale air was thick with dust. The team moved cautiously, their flashlights revealing glimpses of the asylum's former life. Wheelchairs overturned, medical equipment rusting in corners, and old patient records scattered across the floor. Each step echoed through the empty halls, amplifying their sense of isolation and vulnerability. They chose a central room as their base of operations, setting up their equipment with practiced efficiency. Eric positioned cameras at key points throughout the building, ensuring they had comprehensive coverage. Lisa began to meditate, opening herself to the spiritual energies of the asylum. Maria, meanwhile, unpacked her collection of historical documents and maps, ready to cross-reference anything they might find. John double-checked their supplies, his mind racing with both anticipation and dread. As the last rays of sunlight faded, they gathered in their makeshift command center, reviewing their plan. They would split into pairs, each team taking a different wing of the asylum. Eric and Maria would focus on documenting any physical evidence of cult activity, while John and Lisa would concentrate on detecting and communicating with any spirits. With everything in place, they donned their headlamps and set out, the true investigation now beginning in earnest. The darkness enveloped them as they ventured deeper into the heart of the asylum, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. John and Lisa took the east wing, their flashlights barely penetrating the thick darkness that seemed to press in from all sides. The halls were lined with remnants of the asylum's past, old gurneys, broken tiles, and the occasional faded photograph of long-forgotten patients. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence, interrupted only by the occasional creak of the building settling. Lisa, her senses heightened, moved with caution, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of spiritual activity. As they ventured deeper into the wing, they began to notice disturbing artifacts. They found symbols crudely carved into the walls, resembling those described in the journal entries and old records. Some symbols were accompanied by stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. John documented everything with his camera, each flash illuminating the macabre evidence of the cult's past activities. In one room, they discovered a makeshift altar adorned with animal bones and melted candles, a chilling reminder that the asylum had been more than just a place of suffering for its patients. Meanwhile, Eric and Maria explored the West Wing, focusing on capturing physical evidence of the cult's rituals. Eric set up motion detectors and thermal cameras, hoping to catch any anomalous movements or temperature changes. Maria sifted through the detritus of the asylum, her historian's eye catching details that others might overlook. She found patient records with entries abruptly cut off, and notes in the margins that hinted at secret ceremonies and forbidden practices. One particularly eerie find was a collection of photographs showing hooded figures gathered around an altar, their faces obscured but their intent clear. As the night wore on, both teams began to feel a growing sense of unease. The asylum seemed to come alive with whispers and distant sounds that defied explanation. Lisa felt an icy chill whenever they approached certain rooms, her psychic senses warning her of lingering malevolent presences. She relayed her impressions to John, who noted that the areas she reacted to often coincided with the locations of the most disturbing artifacts. Eric reported similar findings, with his equipment detecting unexplained fluctuations and movement in the empty halls. Back in their makeshift command center, the team regrouped to share their findings. Maria had uncovered a treasure trove of historical evidence that shed new light on the asylum's dark past. She had found a hidden cache of documents in the old administrator's office, detailing the activities of a clandestine group that had infiltrated the asylum's staff in the 1950s. The documents included correspondences between members, outlining their plans to use the asylum's patients in rituals aimed at summoning and binding demonic entities. One particularly disturbing letter described a ritual conducted on the night of a lunar eclipse, intended to open a gateway to another realm. The letter's author claimed that the ritual had been successful, but that the power they had unleashed was beyond their control. The following days saw a series of violent incidents and disappearances, which the asylum's administrators had covered up to avoid scandal. These documents confirmed what the local legends had long suggested, that the asylum had been a hotbed of occult activity, with patients and staff alike falling victim to the cult's dark practices. Maria also found patient records that told a tragic story. Many of the asylum's inmates had been subjected to cruel experiments and treatments, which seemed to escalate in severity during the cult's period of influence. Some records hinted at patients being taken to the basement for special treatments, from which they never returned. These findings painted a grim picture of life in the asylum, where the lines between caregiver and cultist had blurred, and where the vulnerable had been exploited for nefarious purposes. Armed with this new information, the team realized the true extent of the danger they were facing. The cult's influence had not only permeated the asylum's operations, but had left a lasting imprint on the very fabric of the building. The artifacts and symbols they had found were not just relics of the past. They were part of an ongoing ritualistic practice that had yet to be fully uncovered. The team's determination to expose the truth and survive the night intensified, knowing that their investigation could bring them face to face with the cult's lingering presence. As the team resumed their investigation, the asylum's atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Lisa, who had been sensitive to spiritual energies since childhood, began to feel a malevolent presence growing stronger with each passing hour. She could sense eyes watching them from the shadows, and every so often she would catch a glimpse of a figure darting out of sight. She shared her feelings with John, who tightened his grip on his flashlight, his sense of foreboding deepening. It wasn't long before the rest of the team experienced the first tangible signs of the cult's presence. Eric, monitoring the feeds from his motion detectors and thermal cameras, noticed sudden spikes in activity. Shapes moved through the hallways where no living being should have been, and cold spots appeared and disappeared inexplicably. Eric radioed the others, his voice tense as he described the anomalies. The team knew they were not alone, and that the cultists, or their remnants, were aware of their presence. While exploring the lower levels, Maria found a hidden door leading to a series of underground tunnels. These tunnels were not on any of the asylum's blueprints, suggesting they had been constructed in secret. As they ventured deeper, the walls became more adorned with satanic symbols and phrases in Latin. The air grew colder, and the flickering of their flashlights seemed to struggle against the encroaching darkness. They heard faint chanting coming from further within the tunnels, a low, rhythmic drone that chilled them to the bone. The team moved cautiously towards the source of the chanting, their nerves frayed and senses on high alert. As they rounded a corner, they saw a group of hooded figures gathered in a dimly lit chamber, their faces obscured and their voices raised in a sinister incantation. The figures stood around a crude altar, upon which lay an old, leather-bound book and a collection of ancient artifacts. The sight confirmed their worst fears. The cult was not only active, but was in the midst of performing a ritual. Realizing the gravity of their discovery, John motioned for the team to retreat quietly, but it was too late. One of the hooded figures turned, its eyes glowing unnaturally in the dim light. A shout rang out, and the cultists abandoned their ritual to pursue the intruders. Panic surged through the team as they fled back through the tunnels, the cultists' footsteps echoing ominously behind them. The tunnels twisted and turned, and it was all they could do to keep from getting lost in the labyrinthine passages. Bursting out into the main building, they frantically searched for a place to hide or barricade themselves. They found a small reinforced office and hurriedly locked the door, barricading it with whatever furniture they could find. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they tried to listen for any sounds of pursuit. For a moment, it seemed that they had lost their pursuers, but the heavy, oppressive silence that followed was almost worse. The realization that they were trapped and isolated set in, and a sense of dread filled the room. Eric tried to use his equipment to call for help, but all signals were jammed, leaving them completely cut off from the outside world. Lisa, her psychic senses on overdrive, could feel the malevolent energies pressing in on them. sapping their strength and resolve. The asylum itself seemed to pulse with dark power, its very walls alive with the residual energy of countless rituals. Maria, flipping through the old documents she had found, discovered references to a final, cataclysmic ritual that was meant to bind a powerful entity to the asylum, ensuring the cult's influence would never wane. As they huddled together, the team knew they had to find a way out before the cultists regrouped and found them. The supernatural events they had experienced so far were likely just the beginning. With the evidence they had gathered, they also felt a duty to expose the truth, even if it meant risking their lives. Summoning what courage they had left, they prepared to make one last attempt to escape the haunted confines of the asylum. As they ventured out of their temporary sanctuary, the asylum's malevolent presence grew stronger. The air was thick with tension, and the temperature continued to drop, their breath visible in the flashlight beams. Lisa, at the forefront, felt a cold hand brush against her arm. She recoiled, her eyes wide with terror, but when she looked, there was nothing there. The others could feel the oppressive atmosphere bearing down on them, each step becoming harder, as if wading through an unseen force. John led the way, determined to find an exit or a place to hide. As they moved through the darkened hallways, they began to experience disturbing supernatural phenomena. Doors slammed shut of their own accord, shadows moved independently of their light sources, and whispers filled the air, seeming to come from all directions. At one point, Maria screamed as she saw a figure in a patient's gown appear before her, its face contorted in agony before vanishing into thin air. Eric's equipment began to malfunction, the screens flickering with static and the motion detectors blaring incessantly. He struggled to make sense of the data, but the readings were off the charts. It was as if the entire building were alive, pulsating with a dark energy that defied rational explanation. He recorded everything, knowing that even if they didn't make it out, their footage might tell their story. In one particularly chilling moment, the team stumbled into a room filled with mirrors, their reflections twisted and distorted, showing them nightmarish versions of themselves. John's reflection grinned back at him with malicious intent, while Lisa's eyes were replaced with dark, empty voids. They hurriedly exited the room, but the unsettling images lingered in their minds, eroding their morale and making them question their sanity. The relentless assault on their senses and psyches took its toll. The asylum seemed to feed on their fear, growing stronger as their resolve weakened. Lisa's psychic abilities became a double-edged sword, her heightened sensitivity exposing her to more intense visions of the asylum's horrific past. She saw glimpses of the rituals, the sacrifices, and the suffering of countless souls trapped within its walls. The experiences left her shaken, but also more determined to escape and reveal the truth. Driven by a mix of fear and determination, the team pressed on, searching for any possible escape route. They stumbled upon a set of stairs leading to the basement, where they believed the cult might have secret exits or tunnels. Descending into the bowels of the asylum, they were met with an even thicker darkness, their flashlights barely penetrating the murky gloom. The air was damp and filled with the scent of mold and decay, the oppressive atmosphere making it difficult to breathe. In the basement, they found more evidence of the cult's activities. Ritualistic symbols painted on the walls, remnants of sacrifices, and altars covered in bloodstains. Maria discovered an old map of the asylum, which indicated a series of tunnels that led outside the building. With renewed hope, they followed the map, navigating the labyrinthine passages with caution. The sound of chanting grew louder, indicating they were getting closer to the cult's current location. As they neared what they hoped was an exit, they were confronted by a series of obstacles. Doors that should have opened were sealed shut, and passages that seemed clear on the map were blocked by rubble. It was as if the asylum itself were conspiring to keep them trapped. John's frustration grew, but he urged the team to stay focused and keep moving. The thought of exposing the cult's activities and freeing the trapped souls kept him going. Suddenly they found themselves in a large chamber, the center of which was dominated by a massive pentagram inscribed on the floor. The symbols glowed with an eerie light, casting strange shadows on the walls. At the center of the pentagram lay a book bound in human skin, its pages filled with dark incantations. As they approached, Lisa felt an overwhelming sense of dread, warning the others to stay back. The power emanating from the book was palpable, a tangible reminder of the evil they were up against. Their presence did not go unnoticed. The chanting stopped, and the room was plunged into silence. The hooded figures turned to face them, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. The cult leader stepped forward, raising his hands as if to command the very forces of darkness. "You should not have come here," he intoned, his voice echoing ominously. "Now you will become part of our ceremony." The team was paralyzed with fear as the cult leader approached, his dark robes flowing like shadows around him. The cultists closed in, their faces hidden beneath their hoods, but their malevolent intent clear. John, determined to protect his team, stepped forward, trying to reason with the leader. "We just want to leave," he said, his voice steady despite the terror gripping him. "We mean no harm." The cult leader merely laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down their spines. "You have already seen too much," he replied. "The ritual demands a sacrifice, and you have been chosen." With a wave of his hand, the cultists seized the team, dragging them toward the center of the pentagram. Their struggles were futile against the cultists' unnatural strength. Lisa, sensing the growing dark energy, closed her eyes and concentrated, trying to tap into her psychic abilities to find a way to disrupt the ritual. She felt a faint connection with the spirits trapped within the asylum, their anguished cries for help filling her mind. She knew she had to act quickly before the cult could complete their ceremony and summon whatever dark entity they worshipped. As the cultists began chanting again, the symbols on the floor glowed brighter, the air thick with malevolent power. The leader raised the ancient book, reciting incantations in a language long forgotten. The room seemed to vibrate with dark energy, the very walls pulsating as if alive. John, Lisa, Eric, and Maria were forced to their knees, their bodies pinned down by unseen forces. Just as the ritual reached its crescendo, Lisa opened her eyes, now glowing with a faint light. She called out to the spirits, pleading for their help. A cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candles and disrupting the cultists' concentration. The spirits of the asylum, angered by the cult's continued presence, began to manifest, their ethereal forms swirling around the room. The cult leader, momentarily distracted, lost his grip on the book, which fell to the floor. Seizing the opportunity, John lunged forward, grabbing the book and tossing it into the glowing pentagram. The symbols flared brightly before dimming, the dark energy dissipating. The spirits, empowered by the disruption, attacked the cultists, their ghostly forms tearing through the hooded figures. The team took advantage of the chaos, breaking free from their captors and scrambling toward the exit. The cultists, now under siege from the spirits they had sought to control, were in disarray. John, leading the charge, navigated the twisting passages with renewed urgency, the sounds of the supernatural battle echoing behind them. They knew they had little time before the spirit's wrath extended to them as well. As they neared the basement exit, they encountered the cult leader one final time, his robes tattered and his eyes burning with fury. He blocked their path, raising a dagger high. "You will not escape," he roared, advancing on them with murderous intent. John and Eric, driven by desperation, tackled him, struggling to wrestle the weapon from his grasp. The fight was brutal, their lives hanging in the balance. Lisa, using her psychic abilities, focused on the cult leader, trying to weaken his resolve. She channeled the pain and suffering of the spirits into him, hoping to break his will. The leader faltered, his strength waning under the assault of countless tormented souls. With one final effort, John and Eric overpowered him, sending the dagger clattering to the floor. Maria, finding a hidden lever in the wall, pulled it, revealing a concealed door that led outside. The team rushed through the opening, the cold night air hitting them like a wave of relief. They didn't stop running until they reached their van, the asylum's dark silhouette looming ominously behind them. They drove away, hearts pounding, the weight of their experience settling heavily on their shoulders. The team made it back to safety, but the horrors of the asylum left an indelible mark on each of them. John reviewed the footage and evidence they had gathered, knowing it would be enough to expose the truth about the asylum and the cult. However, he also understood the risks involved in revealing such dark secrets. The world needed to know, but the danger was far from over. Lisa's psychic abilities were heightened by the ordeal, and she struggled with the residual energies that clung to her. She sought solace in meditation and spiritual cleansing, but the memories of the spirit's anguish haunted her. She remained determined to help those trapped in darkness, using her gifts to bring peace wherever she could. Eric, once a skeptic, became a firm believer in the supernatural. He dedicated himself to developing better technology to capture and understand paranormal phenomena, driven by the desire to uncover the truth and protect others from similar dangers. His experiences at the asylum fueled his passion, and he vowed never to forget the lessons learned. Maria, deeply affected by the historical revelations, continued her research into the occult and the asylum's dark past. She published her findings, ensuring that the truth would not be forgotten. Her work brought her recognition, but it also drew the attention of those who wished to keep such secrets buried. She remained vigilant, aware of the shadows that still lingered. Despite their escape, the asylum's dark presence remained. The spirits, though momentarily freed, were still bound to the place of their torment. The cult's influence, though diminished, persisted in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to rise. The team knew that their battle was not over, and that others would need to continue the fight against the darkness. For the protection of the place and various individuals, the asylum remained unnamed in their reports. Its secrets, partially unveiled, still held power, and the team hoped that by keeping its identity hidden, they could prevent further tragedy. But the legend of the abandoned asylum and the horrors it contained would live on, a warning to those who dared to seek the truth. Now, with that story concluded, let's move on to the final story of the video. Emma paced her small apartment, reviewing the research she had compiled over the past few months. Crestwood Asylum, once a state-of-the-art psychiatric facility, had been abandoned for decades. Rumors of inhumane treatments, patient disappearances, and dark rituals conducted by a satanic cult had piqued her curiosity. As a freelance journalist, Emma thrived on uncovering the truth behind local legends and urban myths. The asylum was her next big story, one that could finally put her name on the map. She packed her camera, a flashlight, and a few essential tools into her backpack, double-checking her notes before heading out. The sun was beginning to set as she drove towards the outskirts of town, where the asylum stood, hidden away from prying eyes and steeped in mystery. The iron gates of Crestwood Asylum creaked open with a push, and Emma stepped onto the overgrown path leading to the main building. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant cawing of crows. The asylum loomed ahead, its windows dark and empty, like soulless eyes watching her every move. Emma took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. She was no stranger to abandoned places, but Crestwood felt different, more malevolent. As she approached the entrance, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Inside, the asylum was a labyrinth of decaying hallways and empty rooms. Emma's flashlight beam revealed peeling paint, broken furniture, and scattered debris. She moved cautiously, documenting everything with her camera. Each flash of light seemed to reveal more disturbing details. Graffiti depicting satanic symbols, crude drawings of demonic figures, and remnants of rituals long forgotten. In one room, she found an old rusted gurney with leather straps, the walls around it covered in desperate scratch marks. Emma shuddered, imagining the horrors that had taken place there. She pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Emma stumbled upon a hidden office, its door slightly ajar. Inside, she found an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. The entries were written by a former nurse, detailing her discovery of a cult that had infiltrated the asylum in the 1950s. The cult had performed dark rituals, using the patients as unwilling participants. The final entry was a frantic scrawl, warning of an impending ritual to summon a powerful demon. Emma's heart raced as she read the last words. "They are still here. They will never leave." The sound of chanting echoed through the halls, sending a chill down Emma's spine. She cautiously moved towards the source, her flashlight flickering as she approached. Peering around a corner, she saw a group of hooded figures gathered in a dilapidated room, their low chants filling the air with a sense of dread. Emma snapped a few photos, her hands trembling. She knew she needed to get out and report her findings, but as she turned to leave, a floorboard creaked beneath her feet. The chanting stopped abruptly, and the hooded figures turned as one, their faces hidden in shadow. Emma bolted, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. She reached for her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Panic set in as she realized the cultists were following her. She ducked into a nearby room, barricading the door with a heavy desk. The silence was deafening, broken only by her ragged breaths. She tried to calm herself, but but the fear was overwhelming. Emma knew she was trapped, with no way to call for help and no clear escape route. She was on her own. As the hours passed, strange things began to happen. The temperature dropped, and Emma could see her breath in the air. Whispers filled the room, though there was no one there. Shadows moved on their own, and objects shifted position when she wasn't looking. Her flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Emma's mind raced, trying to make sense of the supernatural events. She felt her sanity slipping, the asylum's dark influence taking hold. She knew she had to get out before she lost herself completely. Desperation gave Emma strength. She pushed the desk aside and ventured back into the halls, searching for an escape. She found hidden passages, each more twisted and dark than the last. In one room, she discovered a collection of old photographs, each depicting the cult's rituals and their victims. Her stomach churned, but she pressed on, determined to survive. She found a staircase leading to the basement, hoping it would offer a way out. The air grew colder as she descended, the sense of dread intensifying. The basement was a maze of tunnels, filled with more symbols and evidence of the cult's activities. Emma stumbled into a large chamber, illuminated by candles. The cult was there, preparing for a ritual. At the center of the room was an altar, and she realized with horror that they intended to sacrifice her. The hooded figures chanted in a language she couldn't understand, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She tried to back away, but the cultists surrounded her, blocking her escape. The leader, a tall figure with a deep voice, stepped forward, holding a ceremonial dagger. "You should not have come here," he intoned. "Now you will become part of our ceremony." Emma fought with everything she had, but the cultists were too strong. They dragged her to the altar, binding her hands and feet. The leader began the ritual, his voice rising in a crescendo of dark power. Shadows writhed on the walls, and the air hummed with energy. Just as the dagger was about to descend, a burst of light filled the chamber. For a moment, Emma thought she was saved, but the light quickly turned dark and oppressive. The ground shook, and a demonic figure emerged from the shadows, summoned by the cult's ritual. Emma's screams echoed through the halls of Crestwood Asylum, but no one was there to hear them. The cult's ritual was complete, and the demonic entity had been summoned. As the asylum fell silent once more, the dark presence lingered, ready to claim its next victim. Emma's disappearance became another mystery, another name added to the list of those lost to Crestwood's dark history. The asylum remained a place of fear and legend, its secrets buried deep, but its evil ever present, waiting for the next curious soul to wander into its grasp.